Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Joe. Thanks for tuning in today. I had a great match earlier today against what looked like the blue-white Thopter gifts deck that Thompson ran at, I believe, an SCG Invitational a couple weekends ago. I'll try to post a link to his video deck tech because it's a really cool deck. It can be a little clunky at times, drawing sort of the wrong side of the deck at any moment. You know, it's got Gifts Ungiven as a tutor to find combo pieces, but then it's got all of the other sort of pieces that it can grab, and it can have a very weird mix at any point. Like you could draw, for example, an Elish Norn and an On Burial Rites and a Gifts Ungiven all in the same hand, and really you don't want Elish Norn in hand at any point, really, and you don't want On Burial Rites. Those are things that you want to be able to get with Gifts Ungiven. But you can get, weird clunky hands like that. But Gerry Thompson did really, really well with it. I think he might have actually made it all the way to the top 8. So it might be a player in the modern metagame as we move forward after the recent ban list changes. But today it was a really great match, and I wanted to show you guys the replay. Looking at the opening hands, it's a really, really strong Merfolk hand with 2 lands, including a Cavern of Souls, which I recently upped to 3 copies in the deck, choosing to replace Seagate Wreckage for the 3rd Cavern of Souls, an Aether Vial for turn 1, and then 2 Lords, always great, a Silvergill to draw more cards, and a Harbinger to bounce any threatening creatures. On the opponent's side of things, we can see that he has 4 lands, not unusual at all for a more control-oriented deck to have a land-heavy opening hand. Actually, this is a pretty great hand, I think. He has access to a Path to Exile and Serum Visions as 1-drops, and Gifts Ungiven to give him access to his combo pieces and finishers. So easy keeps for both players. I'll choose to lead with a Cavern of Souls and an Aether Vial. I chose to lead with Cavern of Souls over Wanderwine Hub simply because Wanderwine Hub forces me to reveal a Merfolk from my hand. Better here just to lead with Cavern of Souls, I think. The opponent cracks a Flooded Strand going down to 19 for a basic island, casts Serum Visions, which will resolve. The opponent draws into another land, and in the chat box over here we can actually see that he scryed 2 more lands to the bottom. So that Serum Visions did a lot of work, sort of shuffling lands away to the bottom of his deck, hopefully drawing him into spells. I draw my 3rd land, which is always good. I'll play Wanderwine Hub, revealing Silvergill Adept, casting Silvergill Adept, revealing Lord of Atlantis. The Adept draws me into an Aether Vial. Not optimal, but not terrible. The opponent draws into a 2nd Gifts Ungiven, which is pretty clunky given the rest of his hand, and in a strange decision, chooses to play a tapped Celestial Colonnade rather than either a Glacial Fortress or Plains, either of which would give him access to Path to Exile this turn. But the opponent, feeling pretty unthreatened by Silvergill Adept, I guess feels that he can wait safely until next turn to exile any of my creatures. I'll add a 2nd counter to Aether Vial and draw a Curse Catcher for the turn. Now, seeing that I'm playing against a blue-white opponent, I have no idea that it's any sort of combo, whether it be the Thopter Sword combo or Gifts Ungiven combo or both. I just want to, being on the play, push as much damage as possible. So I'll lead with Curse Catcher, just as a potential counterspell for any tricks he might have. Play one of my lords, put the other lord onto the battlefield using Aether Vial, and swing for 4 with the Silvergill Adept. The opponent untaps and draws into Elish Norn, continuing his clunky draws. Opponent will play a tap Talaria West and pass the turn back to me. I'll leave Aether Vial on 2, draw into a Spreading Seas. Now, it's important to note that Spreading Seas here is quite good, despite the opponent already having 3 blue mana, because he only has access to 1 white mana. Now, as you probably know, Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, these kinds of spells, board wipes, white board wipes, require 2 white mana. And so taking him off of 1 of his white mana is going to slow him down from casting any board wipes by at least 1 turn. So I'm going to try to lure out any counterspells he might have by leading with Aether Vial, representing that I might follow up with an uncounterable Merfolk. He doesn't counter that, so I go ahead and follow up with Spreading Seas, targeting Celestial Colonnade. He'll use his white mana in response to cast a Path to Exile on my Lord of Atlantis, which will resolve because the opponent has mana to pay for Curse Catcher if I chose to sacrifice him. I get a tapped island from my library. My Lord is exiled, and I finish resolving Spreading Seas on Celestial Colonnade, drawing into a Regery. which is nice because, as I've mentioned, we just want to do as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. We attack here for 7, between 3, 2, and 2, and the opponent goes down from 15 to 8. That's all I can do, so I pass it over. He draws an extremely clunky Unburial Rites, plays a Plains, and passes the turn. At the end of the opponent's turn, I activate Ether Vial. Knowing that he's dead with any other creature on the table with him at 8 life, with no removal in hand, he just chooses to scoop when I activate Ether Vial. So that was game 1, pretty decent for Merfolk, extremely clunky for the blue-white Thopter Gifts deck. Let's see how game 2 went. So looking at the opening hands, we can see that I hit no lands, so I'm going to have to mulligan. The opponent on his side has 4 lands with removal, Gifts Ungiven, and Elish Norn, which is an easy keep for them, I think. So the opponent will tell me he's keeping. I'll go ahead and mulligan, and this looks like a solid keep with 2 lands. Silvergill Adept, if I can draw another Merfolk, that'll draw me into some cards. Relic of Progenitus. Now, something I should mention is that going into sideboarding, I pretty much thought my opponent was just on standard, classic, blue-white control. All we saw that game was Path to Exiles and Serum Visions. We didn't see any Gifts Ungiven. We certainly didn't see Elish Norn, didn't see any Unburial Rites, didn't even see the Thopter Foundry. So with that in mind, I simply sideboarded by bringing in 3 Dispels, 3 Negates, and 2 Relic of Progenitus. If you're not playing Relic of Progenitus against blue-white control, you probably should be. They generate a lot of value with their graveyard. Typically, they'll have Snapcasters, which is, obviously just a very, very traditional way of blue generating card advantage through the graveyard. But they also play Sun Titan, which can recur things from the graveyard, and Ojutai's Command, which can return creatures from the battlefield. Sorry, creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. So Relic of Progenitus is a great way of keeping them off of one of their sort of longer game value engines. So this looks like a very good hand to me, and I decide to keep. Scrying, I actually saw an Ether Vial on the top. I chose to keep that and drew it for my first draw step. Play Oboro, play Ether Vial, and pass the turn back to the opponent, who played a tapped Celestial Colonnade for his first turn. Now drawing into a Spell Snare probably seems pretty sweet to the opponent. He goes ahead and plays a tapped Hallowed Fountain, preserving his life total. I'll untap, and for my draw step, I hit a negate. Not a Merfolk, so I cannot play Silvergill Adept, but it's actually to my benefit. I get to play around the Spell Snare unknowingly. I'll play Wanderwine Hub, revealing Silvergill Adept at this point, because I do want the mana up after playing Relic of Progenitus to either pop the Relic of Progenitus, so that seems unlikely. More likely is I might need to cast a Dispel against the opponent's instance. Okay, so I passed the turn. The opponent drew into a Thirst for Knowledge. We can see that this is a much more productive hand than last game. The opponent plays a Flooded Strand and passes, probably trying to resolve this Thirst for Knowledge at the end of my turn. Okay, I draw into a Mutavault, which is great. I really wanted to hit my 3rd land here. Now, Mutavault is going to be the optimal land drop here. We're going to want to start to establish some board presence with creatures. If I hadn't drawn into a Mutavault here, I probably would have used Ether Vial on my main phase to bring Silvergill Adept and try to draw into a Mutavault, because that's going to be the optimal land drop, as I've mentioned. Having hit it already naturally, I can wait until my opponent's end step to bring Silvergill Adept in, and just make the opponent's mana a little bit less efficient. If I were to play Silvergill Adept now, the opponent could use his Path to Exile on my turn, and then he'd get to untap and have access to all of his mana. By waiting until his turn, I make his mana less efficient. Okay, so I drew into a negate. Having no place here, I have 3 counter spells, and as I just explained my play with Silvergill Adept, I'll just pass the turn back to the opponent. He's going to crack his Flooded Strand, and just to stay on top of things, I activate the Relic of Progenitus now. The opponent's going to try to resolve for Thirst for Knowledge, but with access to 3 counter spells, I'm going to counter the Thirst for Knowledge. We don't want to give him any more cards than he absolutely has to draw. So he hits Thopter Foundry, which is sort of one piece of the Thopter Foundry, sort of the meat combo. Now the opponent chooses to leave 4 mana open. I'll activate Ether Vial, bringing in Silvergill Adept at the end of his turn. We can see that the opponent is threatening to cast Gifts Ungiven at the end of my turn. But again, with access to 2 counter spells, that's probably not going to resolve. Silvergill comes in, draws me into a Cavern of Souls, which is good against most blue-white decks, but as we've seen, this opponent doesn't really seem to play counterspells. I guess that this combo-oriented version can't really afford the spots for any counterspells. A good tip with Relic of Progenitus, when you're not actually cracking it, to exile everything from the graveyards and draw a card. It's good if you have an Ether Vial in play and you're going through the motions of thinking about Ether Vial during your upkeep. You should also think about Relic of Progenitus then, just so you don't forget about it. It's a good time just to activate it, make the opponent thin out his graveyard. Otherwise, it's very easy to forget to activate Relic on a turn cycle with a very sort of busy board state, a lot of lands, a lot of creatures, that kind of thing. And you always want to use it as much as possible. So we go ahead and exile the opponent's Thirst for Knowledge. Moving to the main phase, I draw Lord of Atlantis. Now we haven't seen any board wipes yet, but I'm still playing a little bit sort of carefully. In these colors, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to play some number of board wipes against an aggressive deck like Merfolk. So for that reason, I choose to keep the Lord of Atlantis in my hand rather than overextending and putting all my creatures on the table. So this turn, I went ahead and swung for 4. The opponent went down to 15, and I still have access to 2 of my counterspells. The opponent tries Gifts Ungiven, and I hit it with a Dispel. Okay, the opponent draws a redundant Thopter Foundry, chooses to play it, leaving mana up for either Spell Snare or Path to Exile. Okay, so on my turn, at the end of his turn, I'm going to go ahead and activate Ether Vial. Now, this could be considered a slight misstep. With a negate in hand, it's probable that I should have gone into my turn and waited to cast Ether Vial, activate Ether Vial to bring the Lord in then, so that I could have access to mana to use my negate to counter any spot removal. My thought was that using Ether Vial now, I could bring the Lord in, untap, potentially draw another 2-drop, use Ether Vial again, activate Mutavault, and still have mana available for negate next turn. However, the opponent did have the path, and I paid for it by him exiling my Lord of Atlantis on my end step. However, it does get me a tapped island. I leave Ether Vial on 2 and proceed to draw a Curse Catcher. It's a creature, not the best at this point in the game with all of this mana. So I'll activate Relic. Again, as soon as you think about it, it's best just to activate it. The opponent gets to choose what to exile. So just activate it when you think about it. So I activate Mutavault and attack. The opponent here is going to choose to sacrifice his Thopter Foundry to itself to make a 1/1 Thopter and block my Silvergill Adept. In this case, Thopter Foundry pretty much acting like a Doomblade, which is fine. I still need to try to push damage. I can't just sit here doing nothing. Follow up with a Curse Catcher, leaving up 2 mana for negate or to crack the Relic if it becomes necessary. The opponent draws into a Serum Visions. I let that resolve. I'm not going to waste my 1 counterspell on Serum Visions. The opponent drew into his 5th land, and it looks like he chose to keep both of those on top. He follows up by playing the tapped land, tries to resolve his 2nd Thopter Foundry, which I deem worthy of my negate. So moving into my turn, I draw Master of Waves, which is quite a good draw. Activate Relic. He exiles his Serum Visions, attack with Curse Catcher, and follow up with Master of Waves. Now, doing a little bit of math, we have 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 3 is 10. 10 damage, which could put the opponent at 3. He does have access to Celestial Colonnade as a blocker. So again, thinking about it, we activate the Relic of Progenitus, keeping the graveyard thin, and we draw into Akira here. Realizing with the opponent on 2 cards, and him having not played a Wrath on that past turn, with all of these creatures on the table, he almost definitely would have gone ahead and played his Supreme Verdict or Wrath of God when I had all these creatures out. However, since he didn't do that, I realized if he has any removal, it's probably just spot removal. So I should go ahead and commit the Kira to the board now, just to threaten more damage. With the Celestial Colonnade as a blocker, I don't want him to take out my Mutavault with his 4/4, but I don't mind if he eats one of these guys, and I do want to keep pushing damage. Go ahead and attack for 5, activates Celestial Colonnade, blocks one of the elementals, and just takes 3, going down to 10. Now at this point, I'm feeling pretty good with the board state. We don't realize that he has Elish Norn in hand, threatening to basically wipe our board and any hope at victory in this second game if he draws just another land. So go ahead and pass the turn. The opponent does hit his 7th land, resolves Elish Norn. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, knowing that the opponent, or rather thinking that the opponent was on traditional blue-white control, Echoing Truth is not the best card against them. They play Snapcaster Mage, and we never want to Echoing Truth the Snapcaster Mage. So, Echoing Truth is one of my few outs to Elish Norn, where I can sort of bounce Elish Norn, throw a bunch of creatures into play with Ether Vials, and attack for lethal while the opponent thinks he's safe with Elish Norn on the table. In a situation where I don't have Echoing Truth in the deck, it's likely that I'm never going to be able to get around Elish Norn. Even with 2 Ether Vials, if we activate both of them, one of them will resolve at a time and put a Lord into play. That Lord is going to die because it gets -2/-2 before the second Ether Vial resolves. Then when the second Ether Vial resolves and the next Lord comes in, he's going to die too. So unless we have a way, like a Vapor Snag, to get rid of Elish Norn, Harbinger of the Tides is not going to do it because she has Vigilance, and so she's pretty much never tapped. So I thought about it for a little while. In the end, I told the opponent that he's got it. So game 2 to the blue-white Thopter Gifts deck. Let's go ahead to the third game and see how this interesting match resolved. Okay, let's look at the opening hands here. Really excellent Merfolk hand, 3 Silvergill Adepts, 2 lands, Lord of Atlantis, and Curse Catcher. On the opponent's side of things, we can see that he has just 1 land. It's probably going to be a mulligan. Actually, in this replay, seeing that he has Muddle the Mixture, that makes it almost absolutely certain that this is the Gerry Thompson build of blue-white Thopter Gifts, because he ran this card a couple weekends ago at the SCG tournament. So we see the opponent chooses to mulligan, 3 lands, removal, card draw, and board wipe. It's a really excellent mulligan for the opponent. Okay, and he chooses to leave his top card on the top of the deck. I lead with a Wanderwine Hub into Curse Catcher. The opponent draws Gifts Ungiven, which is a card they're never unhappy to see. The opponent started with a tap Celestial Colonnade. For my turn, I drew into a Curse Catcher. I did a little bit of math here. As I mentioned earlier, on the play against any blue-white deck, we want to sort of push as much damage as possible in the first 4 turns to hopefully make their board wipes, like Supreme Verdict and Wrath of God, sort of pointless, because if we get them down to 1, 2, 3 life, something like that, then it's going to be easy just to lean on them. So I calculated, how much damage we could push if I play a Silvergill Adept this turn versus the Lord of Atlantis. Now, if we play the Lord this turn, we can do 2 damage this turn, but then next turn we'll only be able to do the Lord's 2 plus the Curse Catcher's 2 for 4 more damage. So the combined damage between this turn and next turn would be 6, were I to play the Lord this turn. If I play the Silvergill Adept this turn, I'll only get to do 1 damage with the Curse Catcher this turn, but then if I follow up with the Lord next turn, Curse Catcher will be 2, and Silvergill Adept will be 3, doing a total of 5 next turn. So the combined total, if I play Silvergill Adept this turn, would be 6 as well. But if I play the Silvergill Adept this turn, I also get to see another card sooner. So having done the math, seeing that the Lord of Atlantis play this turn or the Silvergill Adept play this turn will likely do 6 damage next turn, but total by next turn, it's going to be best to play the Silvergill Adept to see more cards and have more information about what our strategy will be in the coming turns. So I play a Silvergill Adept and reveal another Silvergill Adept and draw into a land. Go ahead and attack for 1 and pass the turn. Now we can see that having access to the information that we're going to have another land next turn, it does help us develop our strategy, gives us more time to think about what we're going to want to do. So playing Silvergill Adept that turn was correct. The opponent draws into more removal and another Path to Exile, which is quite good for them. Just plays a Flooded Strand and passes the turn. Draw into an Ether Vial. Okay, so this turn I'm going to start off with a Curse Catcher. The thought being that even before I play my land here, I want to sort of represent that I only have these 2 lands. Making the opponent respond in a way sort of based on thinking that I'm not going to have access to something like a Lord soon. But by forcing the issue with Curse Catcher, is going to go ahead and cast Path to Exile on one of my Curse Catchers now, just so I won't be able to counter it later. But as we'll see, he has a decent reason for wanting to path one of my Curse Catchers. Wrath of God, unlike Supreme Verdict, is able to be countered. So every Curse Catcher I have on the table is going to postpone this Wrath of God by 1 turn. So the opponent could have waited a little bit longer on this. If this Curse Catcher resolved, and then he tried to path one of my Curse Catchers later, and I sacrificed one Curse Catcher to save the other Curse Catcher, he could just pay the mana, and this guy would still get exiled. So the opponent feels pressured, so he goes ahead and casts a Path to Exile right now on this Curse Catcher. That's fine. He gets exiled. I get a tapped island. The second Curse Catcher resolves. I play the second land now. Play the Lord of Atlantis. Attack with the Silver Guild for 3. Okay. Now, a little bit odd. We're going to see what the opponent followed up with. He taps his Flooded Strand, taking 1 more damage, and gets a Plains, and chooses here to exile my Lord. Now, presumably, he knows that I'm going to sacrifice my Curse Catcher here to save the Lord. He has no mana, and I'm going to pay for the path. It's just what Merfolk will always do in this situation. But if he knew he was going to try to do this, he should have done it during attacks or blocks before damage, because then he would have taken 1 fewer damage with my Lord off the table. He could at least try for it. But so he waits for it. I'm gonna counter it with Curse Catcher, and the path goes to the graveyard. I already have 4 lands. There would be absolutely no reason for me to let that path resolve with Curse Catcher on the table. The opponent drew a card, put an island into play, and passed the turn. We can see here that he has access to Thirst for Knowledge at the end step. Having drawn a Master of Waves, I go ahead and attack for 5 damage, and then need to think a moment about what cards, if any, to commit to the battlefield. We can see that I have 5 damage between my 2 creatures here, so that's only going to be a 2-turn clock. If possible, we want to just kill the opponent next turn. If I play both Silvergill Adepts out, that would add 3 times 2 for 6 more damage onto the table for 11 total. So that's one option, but if the opponent plays a board wipe, then I would potentially only be able to follow up with Master of Waves, of course, depending on what I drew into with the Silvergill Adepts. So Master of Waves in this position is going to bring 8 power to the battlefield, on top of his own 2 or 3 getting buffed by the Lord. So total, he's bringing 11 power to the battlefield. I decide to go with the singular threat in Master of Waves and sort of force the opponent just to have the board wipe. He's going to cast Thirst for Knowledge. I have no response, so he can resolve that. He draws into 2 more lands and a Snapcaster Mage. He's going to choose to discard 2 of the lands and untap. Okay, having drawn into a Sword of the Meek, seems that the only option for the opponent here is to play a Flooded Strand and crack it, get a second island, and resolve Wrath of God. It's fine, it was expected. We have the opponent at 9, which is getting pretty low, and we have access to 2 creatures to hit the battlefield and potentially draw us into more cards. So we drew another Merfolk, so we'll get to resolve at least, well, if we want, both Silvergills here. Okay, so Relic of Progenitus is an interesting card, but having access only to 2 mana here, we're going to try to resolve a second Silvergill Adept, revealing the third Silvergill Adept. Okay, so we go ahead and draw and hit another Merfolk, who will buff these guys and speed our clock up a little bit. Alright, so the opponent hits another Thirst for Knowledge, has Gifts Ungiven available, Snapcaster for spot removal. He can choose to play Snapcaster for Path to Exile, if he wants to go that way. And this turn, actually, that's what he chose to do. I think I might have scared him last game with all of my counter magic, and with me tapped out, he wants to keep my board as thin as possible. So he does that now, but it's fine for me because he's going to ramp me into more lands. It's interesting to note that I've heard some Merfolk players talk about the possibility of sideboarding out some number of lands against decks that play Path to Exile, with the idea that the opponent is going to ramp us into lands so we don't need to run quite as many lands. To me, that just seems insane because, first of all, the opponent might not draw Path to Exile. Second of all, if the opponent ramps us, that's great. I mean, look at my hand right now. I have a 3-drop, a 2-drop, and then 2 1-drops, one of which costs extra mana to activate. So I'm not upset to have access to extra mana. You know, if the opponent gives us extra land, that's great. I don't need to compensate for that extra land by taking more land out of my deck. That seems like a losing strategy to me. So I untap and draw into a Mutavault. Always great against decks that are controlling because not susceptible to sorcery speed removal. Okay, so here I'm going to lead with Silvergill Adept since I only have one other Merfolk in hand to reveal. I draw into an Ether Vial, which is pretty terrible. And rather than play the Merfolk here, I'm going to just go ahead and dump all 3 of my 1-drops, leaving 1 extra mana available to crack the Relic of Progenitus if necessary. Okay, the opponent untaps, draws a land, still has access to Gifts Ungiven. It doesn't feel a lot of pressure for me at this point, but his life total is getting pretty low. Plays the tapped Watery Grave and passes the turn. I'm going to untap, add a counter to each of my Ether Vials, activate Relic of Progenitus while I'm thinking about it in my upkeep, and draw into a 3rd Ether Vial. So we're starting to draw pretty thin here, but we've got some creatures, can start trying to do some damage. I play a Merfolk here, activate Mutavault, and swing with my 3 guys. The Snapcaster here is going to choose to block one of my 3/2s, and then he'll take 3 from the Mutavault, 3 from the Silvergill Adept, going all the way down to 3, and I am threatening lethal next turn. I still have 1 mana up to activate and crack the Relic if necessary. The opponent goes for Gifts Ungiven at the end of turn. I have no counter spells, so I let him resolve it. So for his choices, he chooses Path to Exile, Oblivion Ring, Engineered Explosives, and Detention Sphere. So I think a little bit about it, and one of my first considerations is that I do have a Relic of Progenitus with mana up to crack it if the opponent decides to, say, cast a Snapcaster Mage trying to get access to a Path to Exile. We could always just crack the Relic and get rid of the Path to Exile. So that's an easy choice to go to the graveyard because we can just get rid of it. Now, I'm not afraid of Detention Sphere or Oblivion Ring because I still have Mutavault on the table, and if the opponent takes Detention Sphere and Oblivion Ring, he only has access to 5 mana right now. He can only play one of these next turn. Even if he draws into land, he can play both of them, but then he's tapping out. And I have Mutavault, can draw a Lord, and just win with Mutavault. Engineered Explosives is not extremely frightening right now because it can get rid of 1 3-drop, 1 2-drop, or a bunch of relatively low impact 1-drops. But I decide, it can still get rid of one of my creatures. So I don't know. I put that in the graveyard, and then, like I mentioned, Path to Exile, easy choice there. I give him these 2 clunky enchantments, and we pass it over to his turn. He draws a land, so he is going to have access to both of those if he chooses this turn. He'll start with Detention Sphere hitting the Regery, follow up with Oblivion Ring hitting my Silvergill Adept. Now, tapped out with no blockers, we can see that if we top deck a Lord, we're going to have access to lethal with Mutavault. So I go ahead and untap, draw into a Mutavault. So I didn't hit a Lord, but I still have the Relic of Progenitus here, which is just about ready to be cracked. So everything in the graveyard goes to exile, and I only hit a Curse Catcher. But that's still going to help me clock the opponent. So I'll go ahead and play the Curse Catcher and attack with the Mutavault, bringing the opponent all the way down to 1, turning off any future fetch lands. Okay, play out the last Ether Vial because we might as well. Opponent untaps and draws into a spell snare. So, seeing that I have lethal between 2 Mutavaults and a Curse Catcher, the opponent tries to go for Thirst for Knowledge. And my thought here is to just go ahead and sacrifice the Curse Catcher to limit his access to mana that he has to play whatever he draws off of the Thirst for Knowledge. We have 2 Mutavaults to attack next turn, and better to tax the opponent's mana now. So goes ahead and casts the Thirst for Knowledge, paying the 1 mana to resolve it, draws into Serum Visions. So I think at this point he realized that he couldn't win from this spot. Let's see, if I hadn't sacrificed the Curse Catcher, he would have had access at least to casting one of the Serum Visions with 2 mana up. I don't know what he could have hoped to draw, but I mean, he could hit 1 Path to Exile off of the Serum Visions and get rid of 1 Mutavault. But then he's stuck with the Serum Visions in hand. If he resolves it, he's tapped out and dies to Mutavault. So at this point, the opponent just gave up, and that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think that this blue-white Sword of the Meek Thopter Foundry combo Gifts Ungiven deck is really interesting, and I enjoyed playing against it. So hopefully it starts to show up more and more in Modern in the coming weeks. If you have any comments, please share them. And of course, if you like my videos, subscribe and give thumbs up and all that stuff. And I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks again, and I'll check you later.